Hello, everyone, and welcome to the season 2, episode number 13 of the Behind the Art Inspiration podcast. And in this special episode, I'm in my Kauai studio and connecting with speaker, podcaster, author, and radical flow coach, Angela Ditch of Grand Prairie, Canada. And Angela has a special talent for guiding people to live from their sweet spot. And living in your sweet spot is a tasty place to be. And so, how are you doing, Angela?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Caroline.
I'm so excited to have you. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. And I talked about a sweet spot. So let's start off there. Let's talk about what that is. And then we're just going to free flow and I'm going to ask you some questions.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Well, hello, everybody. Sweet spot is that place in self where you're really aware of what's really happening in your world, but you're also fully open to what's possible, what's potential. And so when you're in the sweet spot, you're kind of in a state of neutrality. You're also really in that position of witnessing. So you're allowing your life to unfold, but you're also observing it at the same time. And so the sweet spot is really that merge point between your body, your human self, your little I, as I call it, and your bigger, more expansive self, your big I. So it's the merging and interface point of that. That answer your question?
Yeah. And so give me an example of somebody who's living from that place, I've heard it talked maybe about like being, super expressive or living an expressive life, or what does that look like for somebody who's never heard that before?
Well, really what we're talking about is living in flow. And so, flow is a wave. And meaning in that wave, you're going to have different states of being at different times of your experience. And so flow is where you're aware in that wave. So for example, you may suddenly become triggered and you're angry. And if you're operating on your little I, and by I mean the vowel I. So if you're operating on your little I, just your egoic nature, you're just going to react however you would react when you're angry. But when you're in that sweet spot, you are witnessing this anger surface in you from that point of view of observation. So you're able to feel the feelings of the anger. You're able to, feel what your reaction is and how you want to react to the anger. But then you're also able to respond and choose how you show up. And so that may be that you express the anger because that feels in alignment, or it may be that you learn something from it and redirect your energy in a different way. So when someone lives in that sweet spot, you're in this perpetual state of being aware of what's going on in your autopilot and then choosing ways to respond. And so what this does is pretty cool, because once you get accustomed to living from this perspective, you can greet your life as it's coming, and you can start to reshape your conditioning, your programming, the memories, the experiences that are popping up in you just from day-to-day life. And when you can start to reshape them, you're essentially repatterning or reprogramming how you react. So you're constantly in this perpetual state of self-improvement and self-awareness. Now, the other lovely part about living in this sweet spot and being in flow is that when you're unpacking the information of your triggers and you're evolving them, as we just said, you're also letting that energy shoot you towards better possibilities. So what happens is something cool. You move from being more in your frontal lobe of your brain, where you're really focused on, what happened to me in the past, what could happen to me in the future, and how's that going to affect me, to more of hypofrontality or less frontal lobe activity, where you let go of time and you let go of self, and you enter into this state of like being really right here in the moment, in the leading edge of your senses and your experience. You become connected to your environment, and you start to synchronistically recognize patterns that you wouldn't have seen before. You're curious, you're engaged, and things are happening in time frames that are dilating. Stuff can happen really, really fast. It can happen really, really slow. And, there's this magical state, excuse me, of ahas and revelations and brand new fresh patterns that you can bring into your life.
Mhm. And so, let me grab my coffee, which I left back.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I had mentioned that the sweet spot can be really tasty, right? And so what I mean by that is that I experience the flow state when I'm painting, right? And so you talked about timelessness, and maybe when I sit down at my easel, I don't know what I'm going to paint. Maybe I do know what I'm going to paint, but it's certainly that I become open to the possibilities of what's going to show up on the canvas. And so when I say tasty, I can mean, for example, if I was working on this one, there might be times when I start and it could be a bit of a struggle of what's going to come out. But then if I just open up and let it flow, then when I really look at the painting, it's really tasty to me. So, and I'm sure that that kind of, that happens to other people in different ways.
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe different creatives experience it in different ways, and you don't even need to be a creative, right?
Well, it is a creative state. And so, I think everybody is creative in their own way. What they might be going to do might be as simple as, creating something in their business, or maybe they're building something, or, whatever it is that they're going to do in their day. You can enter flow states in any way. A lot of people are confused. They think that when someone says flow, that they're talking about a person who's, kind of unfocused and just kind of meandering through life and letting things pop up in this wonderful way that's all
Right,
love
right.
and light, right? And that's not flow at all. Flow is highly focused.
Yeah.
And so flow states erupt when you are literally cracking open the need to discover or explore something that's fresh and new. And so you're literally leaning into the leading edge of that creation as it's happening. And literally, it really is creation and when it's happening.
Right. And I know I've experienced exactly what you're referring to. I might not be able to speak about it, but that I've experienced that. You talked about business, people who in business and owning a business, and that. So the flow in that regard could just be somebody pondering over, I don't know, tell me.
All right. Well, I'll give you an example right now in this moment before I jumped on this call. I'm busy creating the platform back end for the next offering that's coming out of the Flow Tribe. And so it's a combination of, images and words and content and, mathematics and logistics and all of those things plugging into an actual platform. And so to get ready for doing that, the first thing I do is dance.
Nice.
Like I crank the tunes, I dance, and I just let my body kind of move in the moment and get into that moment. Because when I do that, then I get myself into flow states. Other things that I do to trigger that is maybe play a piece of music that I use when I'm really in flow. So it'll trigger that kind of brain state within me, get my body remembering what it feels like to be in flow. And what I do is I put out the the intentions of what it is that I want to accomplish in this offering. And then I start letting myself be led. So maybe I start by looking for an image. And when I'm looking for that image, I start to naturally gravitate toward images that have those feelings.
Oh.
If I were to sit back and mentally think, now, what kind of image do I need? That may be quite limiting. So it opens you up to unlimited possibilities and potentials, and you start to attract yourself toward them. And then, as you know, when you're painting, right, you don't know that you're going to paint on this corner of the canvas in one moment, and then you're going to paint on this corner of the canvas in the other. You just go with what the next impulse is. And so that's how in business you can get yourself into flow states to create whatever it is your next creation is.
Right. So what people don't know who are watching this is that Angela, I actually work one-on-one with Angela. And so she kind of is helping me to identify kind of what I'm already naturally doing, but then enhancing enhancing it because Angela's actually a coach, right? And so she's a guide, she's a facilitator. She's so many different things. And actually, now that you speak about the images that you put onto your website and into your offerings, I am so attracted to those images that you use, and they do elicit a certain type of feeling, right? But I had no idea that you didn't like strategically think those things out, that you kind of they are what you were attracted to.
Well, and I think it's a good point you bring up the word strategy, because again, flow is a very focused state of being. And so, for example, for those of you that remember the movie, what's it called now? Oh, I just lost the name. That's so funny. The Karate Kid. You remember the movie The Karate Kid?
Yeah.
And so in The Karate Kid, the first thing that the teacher did was he had this kid waxing these cars, these used cars. And so it was wax on, wax off. And it was all these movements with his hands, right? Very meticulous training, very strategic movements, very meticulous. Then when he got into fights, he realized that his body was trained to move in meticulous ways. And so strategy is built in, just like an athlete who trains and trains and trains at whatever their sport is. And then when it comes time to race time, they let go of all the strategy and the mental, and they just lean into the race or the game or the activity. And then all those strategies and skills, they just get used naturally in a more free-flowing way. Right? We let go of our mind trying to, lay things out in sequence. And instead we just move with the next impulse. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? Right?
Yeah. And that could be that I could equate that to painting something before, and then just having that mental memory or mental practice and being able to do it right over again, maybe a different kind of a scene, but that I'm thinking about the church that I painted last week in Georgetown, how I had painted it one time and then I needed to paint it again, and it was even more beautiful, but I had already laid down and really, really focused on what it looked like. And then when I went to reproduce it, it was that much easier, and it flowed that much easier.
Exactly. Yeah. The essence of, finding yourself in the sweet spot and learning to live in flow, is wonderful what you can create and accomplish through that. But even at a more base or foundational level, learning to get into the sweet spot, first and foremost, helps you get out of those loops that we get stuck in, those ruts, where we're just in this suffering state. We've got a problem, we can't solve it, we can't stop thinking about it. We're in a suffering state, and there's lots of pressure and stress and intensity. And I think more so, learning to find your sweet spot allows you to take a bird's eye view of that and start to watch the pattern that's at play, like the observer, so that you're no longer caught in it, but you're actually able to see it for what it is. And when you learn to do that, you drop your self-judgment. You actually learn to have compassion for the fact that you're just like every other human on the planet who has a certain amount of information that you contain that is built to loop. And when you get caught in those loops, you're just caught in what's happening. But when you can take that observer perspective, then you have the opportunity to crack that loop open and look for new possibilities. So right now, for example, our world is a little bit on the intense side. I think most people would agree, right? And so right now, learning to find your sweet spot so that you can deal with the stress is important. Because if we just keep looping what we know, we're always going to create the same things. Like Einstein always said, if you want to solve a problem, you have to do it from outside the thinking that created it. So learning to find a sweet spot immediately pops you outside that thinking. And then you turn your focus toward what's possible, and you have all the knowledge that you already have, or the wax on, wax off skills, right? But now you're open to what's happening in the moment, and you're creating something much better. Right.
Right. And so what I hear you saying is, because some people might not understand that are listening to this, what a looping mind pattern is. And so a looping is something that you go to the same thought over and over and over, and it can really take over. Like you're just like thinking the same things, and if you surrender that, just let that go, it does open you to new thoughts coming in, and the ability to solve a problem, or something that you're working on, or and I don't know if everybody's like this, but it's nice to not think the same thing over and over if it's something that is not something that makes you feel good.
Well, true. And it moves beyond thinking, because once you are in a pattern or a loop, your body is also reacting in certain ways. So you take a person, for example, who has a trauma that's embedded in, as soon as something triggers that trauma memory, their body moves into the same postures, their heart rate goes the same heart rate, they breathe a certain way, thoughts start happening, and they get stuck in the trauma again. Now, that's an extreme example, but all the loops are the same. So even when people, are in a lot of stress and develop anxiety, oftentimes what will happen is that their body just memorizes the anxious state, and it keeps them anxious because that's the loop, right? Learning to step away from that and observe it without any judgment or trying to control it, just literally, being with your pattern, allows you to, again, rise above the thinking that's creating it or the circuit that's looping, and start to make the shifts. So, I guess what I'm getting at is finding your sweet spot fundamentally is to live a good life and to be able to evolve yourself, love yourself, have compassion, as well as just start cracking yourself open into, more enjoyable states of being, more flourishing. But on the creative side, it cracks you open into brand new patterns and possibilities. And so it's kind of a live stream of that creativity through you.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So is there anything that you want to share with everybody about where they can find you, what kind of things you have to offer, who you like to work with, those kind of things? What other things you're involved in?
Okay, that's a big question.
I know, it's like I just gave you the world is your oyster.
That's a big
Choose
question.
one.
Okay. Well, I, as Carolyn mentioned, she's a coaching client of mine, and she belongs to our Flow Tribe. And so our Flow Tribe is a community that gathers to do practices on a daily and weekly basis, depending on your desire. And these practices are designed to get you into your sweet spot and then flush energy through your body so that you're opening yourself up to the flow. In addition to that, we teach flow strategies and how flow actually works. And so that you understand clearly what the flow cycle is and how you can find yourself in it and how you can move yourself along within that cycle. You can reach me on flowtribe.ca. And in there, you'll see the latest offerings. Coming up soon is a brand new fall immersion for radical flow. And so it's going to be a condensed 10-week intensive immersion where you're going to learn everything there is to learn about the flow and learn how to practice that in your life. And so that by the time you hit the end of 2021, you're much more centered in your everything and able to actually start creating a reality that you want rather than just surviving the one you're in.
Mm-hmm. And Angela, this is just this much of Angela. So Angela is actually, she's multi-passionate, and she's an author, speaker, podcaster. So much to know about Angela and who Angela knows and all the places that you've been. And so I'm in Kauai right now, and I know you've been to Kauai. And so tell us your favorite place here on the island.
In Kauai? Oh
Yeah.
God, that's a hard one.
Take you on a little trip.
Yeah. I don't know if I could actually nail down a favorite place. What I would say is that there are such amazing people there. And both times I was there, I had wonderful opportunity to do a lot of hiking with groups. And so we were, up in the mountains, we were in waterfalls, got to get those shoes with the little felt bottoms so that you can walk across the rocks,
Mhm.
and of course to the beach. And there was lots of dancing and parties. And it was just such a magical and incredible experience for me.
Yeah, we plan on doing some hiking today. We're looking for the perfect waterfall to go to.
Good.
And that's what I'm doing right after this.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no shortage of things to do in Kauai.
Yeah. So thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And I'll put information about Angela in the show notes below. And if you like this episode and want to hear more about people from all around the world, if you could subscribe to Spotify and YouTube, you can watch a few of those. And Angela, it was so great having you. Don't go anywhere.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.